Well, good morning. I'm August Pfluger, Chairman of the Republican Study Committee, and this is Right to the Point, a podcast where we think we get right to the point on the political matters, but sometimes we talk a little bit about them, but that's important because we want to tell you what we're doing. We want to explain in a transparent way what's going on in Washington, D.C. I'll be your host today, but I've got my neighbor to the north from West Texas, one of my best friends here in Congress, somebody that's a leader that has led the Budget Committee, and I would say is the most instrumental person in our conference on this one big, beautiful bill.
Man, don't blame me.
We're going to get right to the point on what you've done for this one big, beautiful bill. And that's really the episode today, Jodey, is welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be with you. Love serving alongside a dear friend and fellow West Texan, the food, fuel, and fiber capital of the world. You know, what we're doing and the people that we represent do for this country in terms of food security and energy independence is invaluable. But I think you would agree with this. The best thing our people do and our region does for this country is we promote the values that made America great. And those values are woven into this big and beautiful bill from top to bottom. It's the most consequential bill in our lifetime. It is the principal legislative vehicle to advance the America First agenda. President Trump needs the resources and tools to do this, and it's all wrapped up in this reconciliation bill. No one knew what reconciliation was before this process, but they do now, and failure's not an option.
It's not an option. We're 1 week away from July 4th, and we're looking at that as a momentous day, 249 years into our history, and we will pass the most momentous bill to accomplish President Trump's agenda. And today, I think we want to go through the bill. We want to talk about what it is, the wins in it. But let's start with a message to the Senate on why this is so important and what we had to go through to get to this point. We didn't just start yesterday. We've got 220-ish Republicans that we had to weave together in a very tight formation with no margin for error. And as the Budget Committee Chairman, just give us a sense, before we get into the details of the actual bill, give us a sense about how hard that is, and what would you tell the Senate as they're looking at this bill as well?
Well, it was too tight for comfort. We had a 1-vote margin to kick off this process by passing what we call a budget resolution, which set the budget targets, how much we were going to spend, how much we were going to save. And those targets had to be followed closely in the House. And we have lots of different political and policy interests throughout our conference. Some of those are represented in various caucuses, right? So you've got an ag caucus and a rural caucus. You got fiscal hawk caucuses. You've got the SALT caucus, those members from high tax states and locales in New York and California. So threading the needle where you could only lose 1 vote was no joke, and it was a very difficult task for our conference. This was a team effort. But just to put it in perspective, when we passed just the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when I was a freshman member back in 2017, we lost 22 Republicans.
Wow.
For the most popular, I would say, set of provisions in the reconciliation bill. Not that we didn't have the cuts, we didn't have the entitlement reforms in welfare and health care. So for us to pass it with 1 vote margin, coming back and passing all the policies that achieve those targets, that's the bill itself that is now in the Senate, was quite an extraordinary team effort.
So needless to say, we in the House don't want to see this changed too much. Of course, they're going to put their mark on it and they're going to shape it and hopefully make it better. But it just can't change materially too much for us to have to thread that needle again.
That's right. I would say, in theory or just in a vacuum, apart from the fault lines in the Senate and House among Republicans, like SALT issues, or are we cutting enough to change the fiscal trajectory of our country. The reality is we struck a very difficult and very, very delicate balance in the House that could be disrupted on any number of policy fronts if the Senate were to go too far. So our message has always been, please modify this in a modest way. And we acknowledge there are ways to improve it.
Absolutely.
Listen, if you and I had the pen and it was just between two West Texans, I know there are deeper fiscal reforms that would bend the curve even more dramatically on our spending and debt to GDP. But we have other members that we have to negotiate with, and there are a whole list of things. So, yes, make it as good as you can make it in terms of improvements, but there is a point at which you will, instead of bend, you will break the delicate balance, and you will imperil the most important and most consequential bill with the greatest set of conservative reforms in my lifetime, if not 100 years, maybe ever.
And, the content is important, and I want to hear your perspective as budget chairman, because you really were influential on the savings. We started at a pretty low number back in January.
Yes, we did.
And the Republican Study Committee, I think, took a very
hugely
important role in saying, you know what, this is the opportunity. We do want to extend tax cuts. We'd like to make them permanent because President Trump delivered in 2017, and he got our economy into high gear. But we also have a fiscal problem. As budget chairman, working with the Republican Study Committee, talk us through the savings, which is absolutely historic, on the order of magnitude of 4 or 5 times more than we've ever saved.
Well, from the outset, we had objectives. We have now the largest investment in border security and defense in the history of our country, largest tax cuts for small businesses and families in the history of our country. But what we said, and was reinforced by RSC and your leadership, was we're going to do this in a fiscally responsible way. We're not going to add to the deficit. And in fact, we're going to bring the indebtedness down, restore the fiscal health of our country, and address that which is driving the debt, which is the runaway, unbridled spending in this town.
And President Trump is a businessman. He understands the fiscal situation. He wants to balance the budget. He understands that we have to save. Have we done rescissions in decades? No. And he sent us rescissions to save. What are the biggest, just talk the average American through the highlights of One Big Beautiful Bill. What does it do? What does this One Big Beautiful bill do for them?
Well, let me first just go back to your question, because I want to reiterate. I remember when our Vice President, J.D. Vance, was at our retreat. And I remember you standing up and saying, the national debt is an issue of national security. I also remember the statement that you put out. It was very, I think, risky early on to say, whatever happens in this bill, and we have a lot of good policies, and we have some extraordinary stretch goals, but we have to maintain a deficit neutral or balanced budget reconciliation principle throughout this process. If RSC hadn't made that, taken that position, and if you hadn't articulated that and stood by it with great conviction, I don't think we would have gotten what came out of the House, which was not only a balanced budget reconciliation bill with actually modest reductions to deficit spending, so they were bending the curve, but 10 points of debt to GDP. That's the real measure of indebtedness, which is higher than we've been since World War II, even higher actually than World War II, and we're in relative peace and prosperity. So we're actually bending that curve, putting us on a responsible fiscal trajectory so that we don't undermine all of this. You can undermine the security side. You can turn the economy upside down because of the bond markets. There's all kinds of travails ahead of us if we don't deal with that. So I want to thank you for that. But look, it's the largest tax cut. It's going to incentivize what we saw after the TCJA, largest investment, largest repatriation of capital, most jobs created. We had millions of jobs. We had 6 or 7 million more jobs than we had people to fill them. That's the problem you want, not a 20+% regressive tax called inflation because of unbridled spending and failed economic policies. So We support our small businesses. Talk about West Texas family farms, independent oil and gas companies. We go from 20 to 23% in terms of the 199A small business deduction. We make the rates, the lower rates in TCJA, lock them in permanent. We give them this business expensing permanent. It's not going to phase out, R&D, et cetera. These are the things that will unleash economic growth and usher in the golden age, as President Trump says, the golden age of economic prosperity where all boats, and when I say all boats, I look back at TCJA, the 2 years after TCJA, not only were we creating jobs, not only was the economy roaring, but you had the lowest poverty rate in the history of our country. Millions of people were lifted out of poverty. So everybody won.
So what you're saying is President Trump not only won the popular vote, but there are 10 to 15 congressional districts that he won in where we have Democrats who are representing. So it's going to help their constituents too?
Oh, listen, President Trump's about helping every American, which is what I love about him. He's just for America. And one thing he knows better than any previous president, certainly in my lifetime, if not ever, is how to get this economy growing and how to create jobs and how to make sure that, and this is important, that not only do we continue to improve the quality of life for our families and working people in this country, but that we have hope. Hope is so important to a country. I mean, that's in some ways, we're dealing in hope in politics. And because of the unprecedented successes of his first tax bill, TCJ, and the deregulation and the America First trade policies and work incentives to get people out of the welfare trap, taken together, as I said, all boats were rising on the tide of prosperity. And hope for better opportunities and bigger paychecks. Hope for this cost of living crisis that our families and working people have suffered through. Hope that comes down and that their best and brightest days for their families in our country are ahead of us. That's what this thing will unlock, but we got to do it right. We got to do it right. I want to emphasize that.
Timely. And it's got to be done in a timely manner.
That's the balance we're having to strike.
And that's why July 4th is important. And I am still hopeful because I think that the Senate is wrestling with this bill right now.
Yeah, they are.
To make the changes that make it better, but to send it back to us in a fiscally disciplined way where we know we still garner the savings, where we do the right things to put money back into the American families' pockets.
That's right.
I have heard a stat from the National Economic Council, from Kevin Hassett, $7,000 to $9,000 per year per family of four is what they are estimating that we are going to put into the American families' pockets, back into their pockets. That's tangible. Hope is right in front of us, and then they have tangible results of money being put back into their pockets.
There's no doubt it happened at a tune of $5,000 per median household income family. After TCJA, wages went up at a quarter of a century record clip. So we're going to double down on those policies. So I suspect it's going to get better, whatever that number is. Kevin Hassett's a good guy. I'm just telling you, life is going to be better. The country will be stronger. Economy will be roaring. And the first and most important job of any commander-in-chief and any government is to keep our citizens safe and secure. And our troops, our airmen, you know this as a fighter pilot, they need to know that their commander-in-chief has their back. But like you said, hope's great, but a little money and keeping a little more money in your pocket is even better. Mm-hmm. Well, so are tools and resources that will help, accelerate, for example, the next generation war machine like the B-21 bomber and other tools that will equip our sons and daughters in armed services to be the most successful and safe at this
which this bill does,
job.
By the way. That's another aspect. $150 billion of additional money that's going right to the Defense Department to provide for those weapon systems, to help those airmen, those soldiers, and those sailors, Marines. Also, $80 billion to our Customs and Border Protection, to CBP, to the Homeland Defense, where the tragedy that we just went through for 4 years.
You think they're not beleaguered and dispirited after 4 years?
How can you not be? And then you have a president who comes in and on day one doesn't change any laws. He just enforces the laws on the books, and he says, I'm going to invest in Homeland Security. I'm going to make sure that we don't have terrorists that are here. I'm going to get rid of the criminals, the gang members, the terrorists, the people that match the terror watch list. Unbelievable part of this bill as well.
You could feel the pride and morale improve among our immigration enforcement agents who we're grateful for, but effectively couldn't do their job for 4 years. And the results have been disastrous.
RSC has convened many meetings, including yourself and Chairman Smith of Ways and Means, to tell our conference, to educate our conference. That's the beauty about our lunches every week, is that we go through and have a dialogue and we have a debate. This past week, we had the pleasure of hosting the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, Mr. James Blair, and what a message they delivered to us. But they also pushed back on some of the non-truths. And one of them, we've had the CBO to RSC. They've committed to working with us. But there are some bad reports that have come out. And I think at the behest of Democrats asking them, talk to us about Medicaid, because this is a historic provision of what we are doing to provide Medicaid to the people it was intended for, to children, to those with disabilities, to pregnant women, not to able-bodied adults who could go into the workforce and need a better plan, quite frankly. Let's get them back to work. But talk to us about this false reporting that we saw.
Well, one thing is I encourage your listeners and viewers to look at the AEI study about the time spent by people who are able to work but not working to date. We're putting reforms in place to address this, but the average amount of the most time spent was over 4 hours by these individuals who are work capable, able-bodied, but not working, over 4 hours watching TV or on the internet, okay? And what I would suggest is that's not their highest and best use as a person created in God's image and a fellow American. So it's just a crime against humanity to trap people in dependence.
This is not the American dream.
That is not the American dream. But so don't tell me we don't have a problem. In fact, if they just took the time that they spent watching TV and being on the internet, essentially, and they put that time to work, they would comply with the 20-hour work requirement that we have in our reforms, not only for SNAP, where we tighten them up, but the work requirement that's never existed in Medicaid. And the fact is, we're trapping generations of people in cycles of poverty when we have policies that incentivize this. That's what the Democrats are fighting for. Status quo, monies for illegal immigrants, taxpayer monies from social service programs and safety nets that were intended for our most vulnerable people. These are safety nets that are not sustainable at the current rate of spend. But the Democrats have been fear-mongering. I think it's predatory because they're preying on the fears of our seniors and vulnerables. And I think it's disgusting. But their misleading lines and mischaracterizations are, we're ripping the safety net away from our most vulnerable. We're going to throw the poor and hungry into the streets and the disabled veterans. And I mean, just the worst, all false narratives. But they're using this congressional budget office number of 7.8 million people that CBO says will no longer be on the Medicaid rolls or lose health coverage. But what they don't tell you is who are these people and why. These are folks who broke the laws.
Let me just tell you who these people are.
Yeah.
1.4 million are illegal immigrants, okay? 1.3 million are already ineligible, but were kept on because of Biden's misuse of the program.
That's right.
1.6 million already have access to other subsidized health care plans, and 2 million are going to be impacted not by federal decisions, but by state decisions. So these lies, Bernie Sanders might as well go into, all Democrats, they might as well just go to their constituency and say, I don't want you to work.
That's right.
I want you to stay home.
Yes.
I want you to stay home, and I'm going to provide you whatever the subsidies and checks are to stay home because I don't want you to work.
That's right. They might as well say, I'm for improper payments that in Medicaid alone has been over $500 billion over the last 10 years, about $50 billion in 2023. And if you look at the full audits of 2 years, because everything else has not been full audited, it's almost 30 cents on the dollar. But they might as well tell you they're okay with losing 30 cents on the dollar, not just of tax dollars, but of money that could go to helping our most vulnerable citizens. One piece that was missed in your list there is the biggest number. 4.8 million of the 7.8 that they're waving around with the CBO letter are people who are work capable, able-bodied, healthy adults who just refuse to work.
So what do our work requirements actually do? What are we saying to those 4.8 million
We're saying,
people?
listen, put the computer down, turn the TV off, and do something that's not only going to be good for you, but good for your family and good for the future of your family, because you will model something that is critical.
How many hours?
20 hours of work, go to school for 20 hours, do community service for 20 hours, and that is the base level expectation. To me, that is the social compact between the half of Americans who are paying the freight for our federal government and supporting these programs and wanting to help with compassion those who need it as a springboard. All these programs were meant to launch people back into work and self-sufficiency, not be a hammock or a trap. And that's what the Democrats have turned them into, and that's what they're fighting to preserve. That plus money's going to illegal immigrants.
I mean, President Trump understands that, and this is, by the way, Americans overwhelmingly support this provision. 80% of our country says, yeah, that's reasonable. Because Americans, regardless of their political ideology, are working. They're providing for their families.
Yes.
Believe what you want on the left or the right, but when you sit down at that dinner table, mom and dad had to go to work. So they believe you should go to work. And what we're saying is, hey, we want to help. We want to help, but we want you to do your part too. And 20 hours a week, I mean, that, quite frankly, that's less than half of what most able-bodied adults are doing. That's not pregnant women. That's not those with disabilities. That's not disabled vets. That's not children. That's not the elderly.
Despite what the Democrats tell you.
Able-bodied 40, 50-year-old people who can go to work and get out of that trap that Democrats have trapped them in.
That's exactly right.
It's restoring integrity to a program that was designed for the most vulnerable. It is going to redeliver for those people who are most vulnerable.
Well, in August, it's going to restore the dignity of work in this country. At the end of the day, yes, there is a fiscal implication here. It's hundreds of billions of dollars, by the way. But the most critical impact to our country is the human spirit and the American dream and the very core of our ethos in America as it relates to work and what it does for the human soul. So it's the right thing to do by all stakeholders, including those who the Democrats have trapped in it because of these policies. And by the way, they're the same policies that Bill Clinton signed in 1996 in the welfare to work reforms.
Right.
And they're the same policies that the majority of Democrats signed, including Joe Biden at one time. That's how far left.
They are rudderless. They are radical. This candidate in the New York mayoral race that is a communist,
self-ascribed socialist.
Yeah, it's just that they really have moved to a position that is it's so damaging. But we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah,
is Texas Tech a basketball school, a softball school, a baseball school, a football school? I mean, you guys are killing it.
Well, we've got commitments from the broader Texas Tech alumni family. We have a regent and the chair of our board of regents, Cody Campbell, who you know well, who's all in to invest in our sports programs. He's been a product of Texas Tech sports programs. He went pro and played in the NFL after his stint at Texas Tech. So it takes a commitment at the top, to be frank, especially in these days, although I think Cody and yourself and others want to make the reforms to save college sports. But you got to have that commitment from the top. We've got it. And, man, I don't know. I used to think we were just a football school before we became a basketball school, before we played in the national championship.
Women's basketball, women's softball. I mean, it's amazing.
We're just trying to make Texas Tech great again.
When you're walking through the grocery store, when you're out talking to cotton farmers, close us out, Jodey, by telling us about what your constituents think about this bill and how it impacts those cotton farmers, how it impacts people that are just working hard every single day.
Well, they don't want to see a 22% tax increase. That would be a mortal blow for them, especially our farmers who've suffered through, inflation, 40-year high inflation. So all their input costs, seed, fertilizer, fuel, gone through the roof. Meanwhile, they've also suffered historic drought, and the safety net just is irrelevant. We fixed that in this bill, by the way. Like, in this bill, embedded in it, is the best farm bill we've ever passed that will stabilize the ag economy so our hardworking farmers can feed the American people, and if not the world, and freedom-loving people around the world. So it's not just SNAP reforms, which is 80% of a farm bill, but real farm program reforms and investments. They're all small businesses, so that small business deduction that we enhanced is huge for them. Capital expensing made permanent so they can buy tractors and immediately expense them and have the equipment to be more efficient. Huge to them.
Tractors are not cheap. It's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And look, a lot of the ag and energy is intertwined in our region, as you know, and opening up domestic assets and energy production in unprecedented ways through this bill, permitting reform, through onshore and offshore public land use, is going to not only remove the regulatory boot off of the necks of our energy producers, but it's going to, I think, open up production in ways that are going to bring the cost down for every family and every business. So you just kind of tick through it. But there's a lot of good things for rural America, for ag and energy, and then, of course, being on the front lines of the border crisis, knowing that help's on the way, not with just a commander-in-chief who's committed to actually faithfully upholding the Constitution. What is that first job? Provide the common defense, secure our sovereign border. But President Trump knows we need resources. If we're going to enforce the law, detain and deport when people are here illegally with no legitimate asylum claim, he needs resources. And we, being at ground zero in the Biden border crisis, have suffered, and we've watched people, families, and friends die of the basically the poison that's being pushed into our communities across the border. So, God bless America, and may God give us the grace and favor to thread the needle in the Senate, not change it so that we break the delicate balance in the House, get the bill to the president, and a big happy birthday of a 250-year happy birthday present to America to make it safer, stronger, and more prosperous.
I love it.
That's what this is about.
This is historic. For those watching, this is the RSC's Right to the Point podcast. You got two guys that grew up in West Texas, grew up in a farming community for Jodey, ranching family for myself, out there on hot, dusty days, learning how to work hard. Those were the values, I think, that got us here today. And those are the values that this bill is going to reinstill in our country, Amen. Which is anyone in our country, regardless of your political ideology, regardless of the language or the religion or what we look like, or none of that matters.
No.
If you want to work hard, you're going to achieve the American dream. And this bill lays the framework out for every family to succeed. It provides for the safety and security, as you mentioned, and it does so with a way that restores integrity to our government, that starts a fiscal sanity and reinstills that into our government approach. And that's how we grew up out in West Texas. Pretty cool to see two West Texas kids, coming up to Washington to just take pretty simple values and put it back into government, so we have some trust again.
Amen. You nailed it. It's keep it simple. It's the values that make West Texas great. It's the values that made America great. It's returning to those first principles and those core values. And you're right; those are reflected in this bill in so many ways. And we will feel a material difference on day one. And I know the president's chomping at the bits because he's got the vision.
He's got the vision.
And he sold that vision in a way that gave him a mandate and a Republican Congress for such a time as this and for such a bill as this. Let's not screw that up.
No.
Let's get it to him, and let's have our fellow Americans benefit from the reality of it. Vision's great. Hope for a better life is great. Let's make America first, that vision, that agenda, a reality in the lives of the American people.
It's time to do it. I applaud President Trump. We're going to get this bill passed. Joining me today, Jodey Arrington from Lubbock, Texas. This is Right to the Point with the Republican Study Committee. I'm August Pfluger. We will see you next time.